Hey everyone, welcome to the Resell Room podcast. This podcast is designed to help you start or grow your reselling business. We're so glad that you're joining us today.
Today, we're talking about the importance of the impact of AI on reselling and what the future could look like. We have a special guest today here with us, John. We're excited for you guys to get to know him, get to meet him, and he has a lot to share on this topic. So thank you for joining, John.
Yeah, thank you all for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, John. Hey, man, thanks for joining us today, man. We're really excited to have you on the podcast. And this is our first time kind of doing this over the web using technology and internet and stuff like that. So we'd love to just hear from you, kind of share with the people who you are, what you do for a living. Just give us a little bit of insight into who John is.
Yeah, so I started reselling about 3 years ago part-time. And that largely was based off of the idea of wanting to rebuild my collection. So Chase would have loved the garage sale in which my collection was originally sold at. Had gone off to college. Admittedly, my dad did tell me that this was going to happen and that I had the opportunity to actually stop it. But, I didn't think that he was going to sell all of our video games. So, and it was, Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64, all sorts of things that I'm sure, probably went for a lot less than they actually should have.
Yeah.
And so I decided that I would start, rebuilding the collection and then, gone online. And this is, a lot of people are going to probably doubt me on this, but it is the truth. I've never really watched YouTube up until like 3 or 4 years ago.
Really?
Occasionally I would get on it for like troubleshooting and those type of things, but most of the time I was just playing video games instead. But Chase is actually the first person I've ever actually subscribed to, which is, I know it sounds insane, but it is true. And so I just really kind of wanted to, learn and obviously improve myself. And that's kind of one of the things that I've spent, I guess, the majority of my career doing is learning. And so that kind of translates back into, well, now I can grow the collection, provide a little, disposable income on the side.
So going back to when your dad was selling your collection, what was like your prized possession back when you were a kid? What was your favorite video game or system?
Probably all the Super Nintendo games. It was each of the initial Final Fantasies, right? Boxes. There's a funny story as it relates to that. I guess we could maybe talk about later how one of those games was recovered. So in the N64 days, my dad decided that he would start writing our name on the carts, which I just, just detested greatly. But
it really hurts the value.
Yeah, exactly. It does hurt the value. But interestingly, I ended up lending Mario Party to one of my friends. And then it wasn't until this past year that he's like, looking through old boxes, and there it was, Martin, written on the game. And so the only game of my original collection I now have is Mario Party for Nintendo 64.
Wow.
That he wrote, and it's solely because my dad wrote our last name on it. So
I love it. And then professionally, can you give us a little insight on your career, and your role at your job?
Yeah, so I back in 2008 is when I kind of entered the workforce, and that will make sense when you find out where I work as to why maybe that was not the greatest time. I work in banking, and in 2008 is when the mortgage crash happened, right, and the Big Short and all that fun stuff. And so I decided it would be a great idea to seek a career in an industry that wasn't doing super great. Prior to that, I was going to actually work at Midway and do game development, but then I looked into their work-life balance, and it wasn't for me. So I ended up going into banking. But I will say, bankers' hours are not what you actually think. We do work a full 8-hour job. But I'm the head of IT and cybersecurity for a community bank here in Bernie, Texas, and been blessed to work there. And our mission statement is to glorify God. And that's probably the part that I am most drawn to about the company, is that specifically. And we've been blessed to be here now, and I've worked there for over 8 years. So I've only worked at 3 banks in total.
Wow.
So I guess you could say I'm somewhat of a loyalist.
That's awesome.
in that regard.
How what does your role entail of there? What is the kind of day in day out operations of what you do there look like?
Well, so I manage handful of people. We do a lot of work with third parties, right, helping us secure our environments and obviously keep the lights on and make sure everything is functioning from an IT perspective. But the way I kind of view IT's main job, right, is we're kind of the mesh between departments and business line to make sure that it actually functions and operates successfully, and then the information is secure, because trust is ultimately kind of the biggest thing in banking. I think it's a large thing in business in general, but in banking especially, people are not going to put their hard-earned money in your bank if they don't trust you. This is a general rule. So
that's cool. Yeah. So kind of making sure that accounts are secure and networks are set up and all that kind of stuff. That's really interesting. I feel
automation, make sure that our processes, and I know we're going to be talking about AI a little bit. So we can kind of get into the way to facilitate that specifically, but that is, making things more efficient, less user error, less user input, just making it generally better for everybody.
Yeah, I was just about to say that's a great segue kind of into the AI space, but I think we first need to kind of establish what is AI.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear, because obviously you work in that field, you've used it. When you talk about trust, there's such a tension that can come up when you think about AI, where it can be a tool that can be really useful and probably help secure a business, but also it's introducing something that almost has a mind of its own, is the fear, What do you think AI is, even in your workspace that you're working in?
Well, I guess you could say the current public consciousness, right, is largely based around large language models, right? That's your Chat GPTs, your Geminis. I still think Bard was a better name than Gemini, but that's a separate issue. That is your Copilot, right, on the Microsoft stack. Mm-hmm. That is largely what everyone thinks about. And they predominantly think about it from a compression of information, right? I put in this prompt and this input. I'm generally doing it to either have them provide me a summary, right? That's where the information's being compressed, or take my meeting minutes and put them into a format that actually makes sense based off the transcript, those type of things. There's a whole another area that I think is debatably more important, that I'm sure we'll be talking about here shortly, but that is kind of the overarching understanding for most people. And obviously it didn't start there, right? Deep learning started gaining traction back in 2015. ResNet, I'm not going to throw out a bunch of names that people don't know, but if you want to do more research on it, feel free to do so. But we really have come a long way from image classification. So that's kind of where you get optical character recognition and some of those types of things. Then we started transitioning into having Siri and, being agitated as we tried to get, it actually to provide the prompt that we wanted initially when that first came out, based off of voice recognition. And so we've come a long way now with these models being able to handle, multimodal tasks and really kind of getting into a whole level of complexity that we haven't done before. And I've heard a lot of people kind of compare AI to the discovery of electricity, and I could definitely see that being a comparable metric to base it off of. But I think the thing that most people will remember is the .com boom.
I was just about to say, I feel like it's even more in recent time when the internet first exploded. You have, Google can tell me anything. Yeah. I can put my information out there. I can put photos of myself out there. And today, AI is being met with almost the same level of like fear and uncertainty that the internet was then.
And it took the internet a second to start to kind of infiltrate into all of these different markets, where when the internet first came out, it wasn't immediately, online shops, online sales, doing all these different things. It was kind of a slow transition into it. I'd be curious from you, where do you see AI starting to move into the reselling space or the online marketing or sales space? Where do you see AI playing a role there right now in today's culture?
Yeah. So I think AI agents is really where we're going to start seeing most practical usage for it. And just for people's benefit, an AI agent basically is a combination of a large language model, your ChatGPT, in combination with tools and guidance, right? I'm now giving this AI access to APIs, right, which is an application programming interface for those not familiar, to be able to make calls to eBay to either access information or send information. It all kind of depends, obviously, what your objective is. And I'll kind of talk about it from a banking perspective for a second, but how I'm actually kind of building out my own use case. I'm a one-man show, so there's a huge benefit for me to have this tool in place to help me be more efficient. And I think that's ultimately probably anyone's end goal. But on the sales side of banking, now, mind you, obviously, there's all sorts of data privacy and governance that goes into this, and I don't want to make anyone think that we're not doing those types of things. Yeah. I'll add a little asterisk that there are things that you really need to think about as you input information into the system. But Copilot Studio is kind of the tool that we are most leveraging. And so imagine, if you will, I'm on the phone, and I'm talking through a sales call with somebody as far as they're wanting to open a bank account or a loan. And, that information is being given to me verbally, right? But I'm writing it down or capturing it, maybe listening to it later. Well, what if that agent, in working with other agents, could then transcribe that information, know what fields are in my system, and then pull that information from that transcript and put it in its
creating the profile
place
as you have the conversation with them.
That's right, without me having to do anything. And so that's something that's just really starting to come about in banking. And admittedly, banking is sometimes behind a little bit on the tech stack as it comes to adoption of technology. This is principally because we are risk adverse. It's just kind of baked into the cake. And so we don't tend to put things in place as quickly. But kind of from a reseller's use case, I'm currently working on, and I'm leveraging Copilot for this in Microsoft Stack. You don't have to do that, right? There's plenty of open source models that you can leverage. You can use Google as far as some of their tools from Google Sheets and stuff. So I don't want anyone to think it's like, oh goodness, now I have to go buy a Microsoft Copilot license in order to be able to effectuate this.
It's never been more accessible than it is now.
But basically, right, I use Microsoft Lists. I then upload the pictures that I've taken, because obviously I don't have a robot to do that part of it for me.
And you're talking about listing on eBay.
On eBay specifically, right, would be the use case here. And so it's then I have an agent that's going to go out and pull the relevant information based off of that image. Now, eBay already has a tool that will do this for you built into its application, right? So you could leverage that if you wanted to improve your listing processes. But I'm kind of wanting to think of it from more of a holistic perspective as it relates to the entire business process of actually getting something listed, right? Getting the pictures where they need to go without me having to do anything other than click upload. And there's a point too, obviously, where you can even automate the upload process, as I'm sure a lot of people know as well. So, but basically the idea is I now upload my images into this Microsoft list that is an identifier, so I know if I needed to troubleshoot and go back and look at this, what this is. And then I'm going to feed that into, it's like, okay, I want to pull a relevant listing from eBay with all of the title information and everything else that I want. And, oh, by the way, I also have a specific way I like the information to be displayed. And I have a knowledge base within SharePoint that then that information could be pulled from, so it knows the structure that I like to see in the description field and how I would like things to be displayed. And then it correlates all those information and then puts it into a draft. And then I'm reviewing that draft before it gets submitted just to make sure that there's no errors, right? This is kind of one of the key components as it relates to any technology you're implementing, is testing and monitoring and making sure that your end output actually is in alignment with what your objective was.
Yeah, I feel like with those systems that you're creating, there's almost you're identifying the source information and then creating automations to where it's going to do a lot of the repetitive click work? Because especially, I mean,
I was just about to say, I can kind of break down the typical like strategy of listing for those that don't know. Listing on eBay is, you have an item you want to sell, you got to take photos of it, you then put in a title, you then put in a description, you then put in all this other information that's going to help it be searchable, that's going to help it show up on eBay. There are now tools that can autofill a lot of that information, but now what we're talking about here is how can you personalize it even more? So say you're kind of like putting your thumbprint over top of this automation. Am I correct? Like you want your description worded a certain way. You like your titles formatted a certain way, where say a video game, you want the title of that video game first, and then maybe you want the condition and then maybe other information after that. You can kind of tell it to do that, correct?
Yeah. And then taking it a step further, right? What is actually being sold and successful? Let's have, through now, obviously eBay's API, there's, things that you have to do in order to gain access to that, right? It's not like it's just, there's some steps here beforehand that you're going to have to do. But okay, well, now I want it to actually learn more and teach itself to be better at listing. Let's take the format and the template that I've created and improve upon it by looking at other items that have been sold in a similar category, and then kind of learning through what needs to be adjusted in order to get that sale, which is ultimately the goal, right? We want it to sell for an amount that we're comfortable with quickly, preferably within a 90-day period, if not earlier. And kind of parsing that information as an individual is time consuming, and I frankly don't have the time as a part-time reseller to do that. So if I can leverage the technology to do it for me, then I'm just going to be that much better off.
That's the interesting thing to me is like in your use case, you've got a full-time job, you've got a family, you've got things that are already pulling your time and attention.
You have to figure out ways to be efficient.
Yeah, because when you're spending your time reselling, every hour you spend on those processes is time away from those other things in your life. When we look to the future of reselling, I'm even like, this is making my brain get creative. Like I could even see, like we've used the app like Flipper before, where you take a photo of a bunch of spines of a game and you can go and pull up the collection or pull up the price charting value and stuff like that. I'm even seeing a future where you can have like a webcam pointing down at a desk and you just pull a game out, show it in front of the camera, say your description out loud and set it to the side, and then having that agent almost start to formulate all those things and list it for you to where you're not even touching a computer.
Well, and when you think about it, the technology does exist in some spaces, especially when we get into the topic of like selling cards. There are card scanners that just auto feed cards, scan it, take photos of it, and then auto create your listings. And they've been utilizing AI even in the card grading space for a bit, but to be able to have access to something like that on a personal, like individualized level, like those are very big businesses doing it, would be a game changer.
Yeah, that'd be huge. John, I'm curious your thoughts on how is AI, where are the places within a business where you think AI is going to be the most useful, even in the next 2 to 3 years? So versus where maybe we're a little bit farther out from getting something that can be useful in. Like, do you think there's certain areas of a reselling business where like, man, this could really help you streamline your business in the next 2 to 3 years versus what's an example of something that's going to be a little ways out?
Yeah. So I would say, I think the agents are going to be and that's kind of coming online now. Right. And I say now, right. There are people that are really forward thinking as it relates to technology that have been working on this for the past 2 years, right? But I'm using it more in reference to just the general, like CEOs and other business leaders are starting to become aware and cognizant of this and realize that they need to adopt some of these methodologies and some of these models into their business practices. Is kind of what's happening there. I would say that would probably be the biggest thing is agents. And then that personalization and customization, because that's another thing too, right? Differentiating yourself within the marketplace, and both in the way that you sell and the way that you do things, I think is incredibly important. So I'll use my eBay store as an example. Reputation has kind of been drilled into me just from a banking. So reputational risk is something I'm very cognizant of. And I have 5 stars across every platform I sell on. So on Whatnot, on Core, I have yet to have a bad review.
Wow.
And part of that is because I'm curating what I'm willing to sell on there in the first place, right, as part of it. But the other part is I'm making sure that we're going above and beyond. We kind of have a concept of surprise and delight, which if you're familiar with the Ritz-Carlton and have read any of, that's kind of a concept that they had that we've adopted, right? You want your customers to be just had such a great experience in purchasing from you that they want to come back, right? You want that repeat buyer. And being able to utilize AI tools to help you be more consistent, right, is going to further that. And I think that's part of the kind of that area in which it will be really beneficial. But to kind of go beyond a little bit, one of the things I think that a lot of people, and I'll preface this, I don't think people are using AI incorrectly when I say this, but we are very much too much focused on compression of information. Right? We're getting data summarized down. Now, if you want to completely understand something, just the way your brain typically works, you don't learn that way, right? A summary is not going to provide you expertise in a particular topic area. So we need to use it more from an expansion methodology. And Nate B. Jones, who's a YouTuber that is pretty much just focused on AI. I highly recommend people listening. A lot of his ideas I'm kind of regurgitating, probably not as eloquently. But one of the things to kind of think about is how can I use AI to think deeply about things, right? And actually further my understanding of a topic. I think as we start using it as kind of more of what a Zedelkaisen, a second brain. There's a software application called Obsidian that I've used for years. And it's note taking, right? But it's note taking with backlinks, and I'm actually kind of taking my actual thoughts and putting it into a mind map, so I have correlation as it relates to things. Well, imagine if you were allowing the AI to help further your understanding of the way you even think, and actually further your capability of taking a topic of interest, whether it's reselling. It honestly doesn't matter what it is. I think this is applicable across industries, and actually using it to think better, as opposed to just, I'm going to summarize this into something short. And prompting and being able to do that is still beneficial, right? I'm not saying that you should just completely preclude that as a benefit, because there are benefits in summarizing information to give to people. But I don't want people to, lose the forest by looking at a particular tree. There's a whole lot that we can do beyond this. And that's kind of where I just encourage people to experiment, right? You should be running a couple experiments at any one time in your business anyways.
I think that's the danger of, I feel like that's the danger of AI in some ways, is people look at it like a shortcut to get to their destination faster.
When you're missing a lot of learning opportunity along the way of, hey, what's the why behind it?
Yeah. If the only time you ever interact with AI is to work less or do less, I feel like that's where you're going to lose the character of your business. Like, I love that you kind of pointed out that you've got 5.0s across the board. A AI automation is not the reason you have 5.0s across the board. It's because of how you've run your business, how you handle yourself and your character, how when something doesn't go right, how you address it. I think that's one of the things, especially with resellers. Resellers tend to have a brain, a philosophy of what's the most profit in the least amount of time most efficiently. But part of owning a business and operating or even leading a team goes so far beyond that, where you're not just, okay, how do I make the most money? Obviously the bottom line and the financial numbers matter, but if you want to have a business for a long time, you can't look at every sale as the end all be all. It's also your reputation, that reputational risk. That's one thing I think you and Chase have a lot in common with, is like Chase is let's do it the right way. Let's not just do it the fast way. And I feel like with AI, people can rush into things because there's suddenly a tool that can help them become more efficient, but they lose what it is that they're trying to do in the first place.
And that's where I like your application of using it as a learning tool. So take kind of all this stuff that we're talking about. How do we make listing more efficient, where you take a picture and it creates this listing for you, but then having the addition of it being able to learn and then teach you why certain things worked could definitely help minimize risk in the future and also prevent learning the wrong lesson, which I think a lot of people experience through using AI through a bunch of, different means. But to be able to learn, oh, this listing worked because of this thing that I made sure to include, or this guarantee that I gave, not that the product was necessarily the best product for me and my business.
Yeah. Yeah. John, I'm curious, what do you think separates when we look 10 years into the future? Okay. And because reselling, people are like, oh, is reselling a fad? Will it go away? Reselling is not going anywhere. It might change. It might morph. But reselling has been around for decades and decades and decades, and it'll be around for decades and decades and decades.
I would argue it's been around since the 1800s.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the concept of basic economics of I purchase X for this amount and I sell it for Y.
Yeah.
Has been around indefinitely. Walmart does that. So
I was just about to say Walmart's the biggest reseller.
That entire concept is existed in perpetuity, and it's one of those things I've never understood as to why there's umbrage as it relates to reseller, when effectively predominantly all businesses are resellers in some fashion.
Well, because they're providing a service. They're taking good that would be maybe available, but they're not a convenience around it. Like, let's just look at Walmart. I'll use Walmart as our case study here. So Walmart gets a good and they make the good convenient because you can go 5 minutes down the road to your local Walmart, get that good, walk in, grab the good, walk out, pay a price and have it. And is there a way to buy it directly from a supplier? Yeah. If you want to buy 1,000 of them.
If you think, you hear A to B, B to B, and B to C, there is no A to C unless if you're looking at maybe a farmer's market.
Yeah. And having those there. So yeah, there is a weird stigma around reselling a lot of times, when it's the reason that it's valuable and the reason that resellers can make a career out of it is because there is a value add. Like what you're doing on Encore, what you're doing on eBay is a value add, because the convenience factor of it to the average buyer who is like you, has a full-time job, has a wife and kids, has hobbies on the side, is trying to do a little side hustle business. You don't have time to go spend 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, going to garage sales or pawn shops, what do you, because obviously this market will continue to morph and change, especially as technology comes into it. Because I mean, reselling back 50 years ago looks a lot different than reselling today, with things like eBay and Amazon have opened up all new avenues versus it being just your pawn shop or your Saturday morning market that you go to or whatever it is. What do you think will separate successful resellers 10, 15 years from now from where we are today?
I think that the key portions of that are kind of twofold. One, obviously, we can't be afraid of technology, right? Change is a constant of life. It's just baked into the cake. Being adverse to change, it's been one of those things I've never understood, just because, I mean, we're on a timeline in which we are constantly moving forward, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. So just being agitated by it is illogical to me. Not that everybody uses logic all the time, but that's kind of one part of it is just being able to embrace new technology, incorporate it into your business. But the other part of it too, I think, is not losing what makes you unique, right? People want to do business generally with others because of the relationship aspect of it, right? If you are the same as every single other person and doing the exact same thing as every single other reseller, then there is nothing that differentiates you in any way. And now you're just a part of an amalgam as opposed to just being some, unique entity. And that's kind of where I think what I hope people realize, the adoption of this technology and the way that you can leverage AI is so diverse. Don't feel that you have to just pigeonhole yourself into this one thing. Use it in a way that makes you and continues to elevate whatever makes you unique. That would be kind of the big, I guess, takeaway for it. And then the other part of that too, obviously, is realize that there are risks associated with utilizing technology, right? The information that you put into these large language models, depending on their privacy agreement, could be used to train the model further. So maybe there may be certain parts of that uniqueness of your business that maybe you don't want to necessarily put into that database for someone else to then be able to garner insights off of as well. So I would just kind of the caution part of this too is just to realize that nothing is for free. All of these open source models as well are gaining something. There's no free lunch, right? As Milton Friedman would say. I don't know if anyone remembers Reagan's Economist. I may be dating myself now, but even though technically I was barely alive whenever he was president.
What is one actionable step that resellers can take today with where we are currently at with AI to either improve their business or improve their understanding of how to use AI in their business in the future?
Yeah, I would say probably the first thing, right, is gain access to a large language model. ChatGPT is probably the one that most people are familiar with. If you haven't played around with it, do so. You don't even necessarily even have to utilize it for business. I've built D&D campaigns leveraging it.
I did last night.
It'd be fun. This is where the shirt comes from. This is what dragons would be playing, would be houses and humans. I know this is a lame dad joke, so everyone will have to forgive me. But utilize it for just stuff in your own personal life for fun and just kind of mess around with it and gain that familiarity. That's really kind of the first step. One other thing I think people often do is they get stuck in this analysis state. Action is so important. If you want to get traction on something and start moving forward and actually develop and grow your business or in any endeavor whatsoever, if you are just sitting there analyzing it indefinitely, you're never going to do anything. So you just need to start doing things. That doesn't mean, I'm going to go out and invest, $2,000 in a Copilot Studio license, right? Like, let's use some common sense, but that's kind of the thing. It would just be start using it in whatever capacity you see fit, because you're going to learn something and it's going to be useful in the long run.
And I feel like a lot of business owners and resellers, especially, they can kind of get caught in that tension between, should I try this new thing and do something I haven't done before, or should I try to mitigate risk and not change something that's working? And I feel like that's a tension that if you go all one way, so if you go completely, hey, I'm going to try every new thing, I'm going to automate everything I can, there's a lot of inherent risk that comes with that.
Well, and you abandon, like you were talking about earlier, you abandon who you are versus if you stick with the same track and you're not innovating, then...
Well, and there's so much, like, even just on its, I'll use Amazon, for example. Right now, resellers, a lot of you guys even watching know full well that Amazon is banning sellers at a record rate. Like, there's just, and it for seemingly random reasons, and maybe some of that is just because their AI models are identifying some things that don't seem right or whatever it is. But when you're adopting new systems, you have to, I love, John, you talked about this earlier, that you have to make sure that you are checking your automations, because if you create an automation that's not doing what it should be doing, it can do a lot of damage really quickly. But on the flip side of that, I feel like people can become so risk averse that they don't ever push themselves to change and grow. And that's where you get the pawn shop owner who's like, hey,
I'm never going to do eBay.
I'm never going online. I'm going to stay right here because eBay has these fees and they've got this, and they never branch out. And that's why we see, there's another pawn shop even this past year here in our town that shut down, is because the average consumer, the idea of even leaving the house to go to a store is almost too inconvenient for some, to when they can go online and get the same thing, usually even at a better price, and have it within 2 days.
And the harshest way to say it, and this has been a saying for a long time in many different areas, but it's adapt or die.
Yeah.
And I think that applies here exactly in that example.
Yeah, and an inherent risk, Thayne, I'm glad you bring that up. That's one of the concepts that we were pretty familiar with in banking, right? But inherent risk is just the start of the story, right? There are mitigating controls that you can put in place to reduce risk. So just acknowledging and knowing that risk is there is the first step. But that doesn't mean it's like, well, oh, I can't do it now because that risk is there. Well, there are things you can do to mitigate that risk, right? Maybe let's start it off at a smaller scale. We're going to test this in a smaller scale to where, in a controlled environment, to where if it does damage, it's going to be negligible at best, right? And then I can iterate and adjust whatever I need to. That is the other way to think about it too, is that there may be compensating controls that you can put in place, right? Like maybe you can't do this one specific thing because of, cost or whatever the reason may be, but there's probably another way to reduce the risk, and just thinking through it and just taking the time to do that. I highly encourage, we kind of have a thought process at the bank of you need to have a thinking day once a week. That doesn't mean that all you do is think all day, but in order to truly understand concepts, just the way that your brain was designed requires you to think deeply about it. And that requires time. And so I just encourage people, just take even an hour a day, hour once a week, and just think about whatever you're trying to accomplish, and really just kind of run it through its paces. Hey, talk to the AI about it. Yeah. That would be, you're doing dual practice now, right? Have it. Now, be mindful of that. A lot of AI are suck-ups and will think all your ideas are great. That actually is a problem in that system that you need to be mindful of. But they may even just help improve your thinking just from sitting there and having a conversation with one, and it will just spark that thought process. Because I know not everybody. I would tell you to go sit there and vet out your ideas with a friend after you've had that opportunity. But some people may, the friend circle, everyone just had kids, they're all really busy. AI could be a great way to test that skill set of helping you think better. So
I think that's one of the fun things about AI is people can kind of assume it's just ask and answer, where that you can, if you ask good questions in AI, you can get some really interesting prompts. Like my wife has used it a lot, even within the house. Like she'll upload a couple of photos or show with ChatGPT. She'll be like, hey, I've got this color of paint. What are some coordinating paints that go with this? And it'll start giving her some lists of different things you can consider and look at, where AI is not making the decision for her, but it's helping give her a box, kind of a sandbox to play in and to think about. Even in my job, part of my role is I oversee a team of people, and so we're redoing our team evaluation processes and saying, okay, what is an effective staff evaluation process look like? Because the normal is like 1 through 5, how do you think you're doing? 1 through 5, how do we think you're doing? But there can be a lot more creative and useful tools beyond that. And I've even spent some time on ChatGPT just saying, hey, what does this look like? And I'll Google something and I'll say, hey, what's the difference in between this approach and this approach? And it does a great job of helping, like you said, expand your thinking beyond just here's where I am, here's where I want to go, and how do I get there as quickly as possible? Mm-hmm. You can actually kind of dig deeper and build yourself as a better leader, as a better business owner, build better processes. Because
I was just about to say, even in our business, this is something that we are using to just constantly reevaluate our systems, constantly reevaluate, hey, ChatGPT, what are some actual pro cons to this idea that we think is so great, but give me the consumer standpoint, or give me something that I'm not thinking of. What am I missing here? Tear this idea apart. And then we'll be like, maybe we need to go back to the drawing board with this concept that we have.
Even thumbnails, titles. Yeah.
And then even in the social media realm, it's very heavily applicable. So
that's awesome. Well, John, this has been really, really helpful. I've learned a lot of things even about AI in this conversation. My exposure has only been in the ChatGPT world. That's all I've ever really known about it, or trying to generate something and doing it poorly in Adobe Photoshop. So this has been really, really helpful. I'd love to just kind of shift, just because I'd love to hear more about you and your journey with reselling and collecting, because obviously you've got this full-time job with the bank and IT and working in that, and you've got a family and stuff like that. Bring us back to that story that we started at the beginning. When you started collecting, what did the beginning of your collecting journey look like?
Yeah. So, when I started back into collecting, one of the things I kind of goes back to that trust concept, right? And so after finding Chase, I found the Whatnot as well. And I was like, okay, well, let's purchase something and let's just see if what I think the character of this individual is reality, right? And so I did a test purchase, and I was pleasantly surprised. And we've had a long-running joke about bubble wrap for a while now.
We've spent hundreds of dollars on just John's bubble wrap.
Yeah, encased in bubble wrap, so to speak. But probably, I guess, one of the more the bigger purchases that meant a lot for me was just Chase's willingness. I got the complete copy of Earthbound there that I never actually owned it as a kid. I just rented it from the store. For those familiar in the South, Hastings is kind of was the rental store for the kind of your mom and pop, competitor to Blockbuster. And so I would go there and rent video games, and Earthbound obviously took a couple rentings in order to actually complete it. But I've always wanted to own it, and Chase had two, and he was willing to sell one to me. And so there you go. And Zelda's kind of probably been the other part of that. That's the franchise I love the most. As you can see, I have an entire shelf dedicated to Majora's Mask up there.
Awesome.
Probably gone a little overboard there, but it is my favorite Zelda game. In hindsight, right, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, I could probably objectively say maybe up there and better than Majora's. I wasn't as much of a fan of the 3DS remake. I felt like they changed some things, adversely. But just overall, really just enjoy playing games with my kids. So I have triplets. They're all 8. And so they were all born right before the Switch came out. And so I have a lot of memories with the Switch, just sitting there, staying up with them late because, obviously I wouldn't
You're not sleeping anyways. In a Switch.
Just leave my wife. You can take care of it. I'll sleep as you're taking care of all 3 of these kids. But, I would, be up with them and just sitting there playing Breath of the Wild. And then, full circle now, the Switch 2 came out recently, went to the midnight release altogether, and that was super fun. And so it's, this is allowed for, benefit for my family as well. They all enjoy playing video games too. I haven't been able to get them off Mario Kart World though. We seem to be really stuck on just playing that.
That's awesome.
So maybe we'll play something else at some point. Hopefully Donkey Kong Bonanza will take the top spot. I've been really excited to play that. I know Brother Dave is too.
Yes,
I feel like the most recent Direct proved a lot of people changed their tune. I felt there were some people that were kind of naysaying it, and then they watched that Direct, and it seems a lot of online personalities may have adjusted their viewpoint.
You want to know who one of those people that was naysaying it was? Engineer Matt. Engineer Matt was naysaying it, and now he's starting to get a little bit more excited with Donkey Kong coming around. And Matt says hi, by the way.
Yes.
Well, but Matt's a Sony fanboy originally, though, right?
So that's right.
He is. So yeah, that's the one thing I love. That's one of the things about reselling that is, I think, under talked about a little bit, is reselling, and the fact that these old vintage video games have become collectible in a way has helped keep those things in great condition so that we can enjoy them 25 years later. Like I'm looking at, like, even for Chase and I, because Chase and I grew up together, and I remember playing, whether it was backyard baseball or all-star baseball back on the 64, or just all these different games that we'd play. And if these were just your average toys, because I mean, think about how many toys do you have, like even Hot Wheels, which are somewhat collectible. Most of those have been.
Think about like Star Wars figures from the 80s.
Buried in a box, broken, sold at a garage sale, where these video games, you get to relive a part of your childhood.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that multi-party aspect of things is really the best part of it, right? Like we used to have LAN parties at my house, so it was either Smash or Halo is typically what we would do. So
that's awesome. Well, guys, we hope that you've enjoyed this conversation. We've loved getting to know John, and we know that you have to leave a comment down below. Say, John, thank you for joining, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode of the Reseller Room podcast. Peace.
Take care.
Bye-bye.